You're listening to Seahawks Stories, taking you behind the scenes with your favorite Seahawks.
Setbacks behind Zorn, who's back to pass. Has time, looks toward the left sideline, throws a bomb down there. He's got a man in front. He makes the grab. It's Raible at the 30, down to the 20. They'll never get him. He scores. Touchdown, Seahawks.
Powered by Seahawks.com.
And Zorn laid it in perfectly to Raible, who goes in to score on an 80-yard pass and run play.
Now, here's your host, the voice of the Seahawks, Steve Raible, and Seahawks legend Jim Zorn.
Broadcasting from the Seahawks podcast studio, presented by Sony, an official partner of the Seattle Seahawks. Welcome, everybody, back to Seahawks Stories. Along with Z-Man, Jim Zorn, I'm Steve Raible. Great to be back with you. We haven't had an opportunity the last few weeks between illnesses and travel and all manner of things, but here we are back. And speaking of travel, you're just back into this country.
I had the chance to travel with Steve Largent and Marshall Falk, who was two Hall of Famers, to Gitmo, and
That's
to
Cuba, everybody.
Yes, and then to Honduras in Central America. And we got back just a couple days ago, and we visited troops, and we got tours of the bases and kind of opportunities to see how things work. And we were treated very well, and there was some great weather down there too.
A little better than here, probably.
And I absolutely knew that people were clamoring to have us back with our podcast.
Yes,
it's just so exciting.
You could sense that, could you?
You know, oh yeah.
By the way, is that
we are.
something that the NFL Players Association or Legends community puts together this, or the league puts this together?
It's really through NFL Entertainment, and they do a nice job because the troops are there. They can't, some of them can't leave. So they give them an opportunity to see, there's a lot of football fans there. And I would say there's a lot of, varied fans when it comes to who they like, where they're from, what they grew up with and stuff like that. And you get to hear all the stories. But more importantly, they really appreciate the NFL showing up. Eric Kennedy, who's the Seahawks equipment manager, has donated for me, I brought down some NFL footballs, leave them with the Commanders. They love it. We sign them, that we take pictures. We get treated better than deserved, I'm sure.
I'm certain of that, except for Marshall Falk. For him, I expect he would be treated very well.
Oh,
you and Steve, I would think, that's...
We danced the jig.
Did you really?
I got bit by a dog.
Very good. But it was an actual
it was
a demonstration.
It was a demonstration. Thank you for clarifying that.
You're working, yes. It wasn't just a wild, rabid dog
who
came running across a field.
No, it was a serious dog that
trained by the military.
That is trained by the military, yeah. And so we got a demonstration to see how they work, and part of it was real life.
Yeah, and I saw, for all of you listening out there, I saw the pictures Jim had on his phone, and he had a protective big jacket on so that the dog can't bite through to Jim. He can just get to the and then probably when you got up off the ground, was he a nice little puppy and you could pat him on the head and he was good? Or did
that
they
one,
say no?
That one, it was like he was doing his job.
Yes.
And it was amazing what they want. They're playing, basically. Yeah. What they want is their Kong. That little toy, dog toy.
Right.
They don't do it for food. They do it for that toy. And when that dog, after they got him off me, they gave him his Kong. He just calmed right down.
Very good.
Yeah, this is what I wanted.
Well, that's the way they're taught. This is a good way to get into our guest today here on Seahawks Stories, because when we got here, pal, in 1976, Sandy Gregory was already here.
Yep.
Up in the PR office, the community it became community outreach and a lot of other things, but it started out as the public relations office. And one of the major things that they did, aside from getting out the story of the Seahawks being a brand new franchise in Seattle, was they made sure that all of us, or as many of us players that wanted to, got involved in community activities as early as possible. And so, without further ado, Sandy Gregory, who has been here since 1976, there are a few of us who are still kind of around the organization that have been. Jim, you've been away for a while at times, coaching, obviously, as a head coach and an assistant elsewhere. But Sandy and I have been here in Seattle the whole time, and this will be and I hate to date you, but knowing that you started when you were 12, this will be next year the 50th anniversary of the franchise. What does that mean, Sandy, that you've been around here long enough to see 50 years of this team?
First of all, when I came here, I wasn't even sure I was going to stay. You know, I came from California and sunny, and I remember Don Anderson's the one that brought me up here. And I'm like, but Don, it rains up there. And he's like, if you don't like it, you can always go back. And then here I am 50 years later. I guess I love it up here. I like having seasons. I love the history of the team and still keeping in touch with a lot of the players and trying to, help them with some of the things that they're doing in the community.
You know that Sandy Gregory was here before our first head football coach.
Yes.
Before
absolutely.
Jack Patera was even hired. So she knows all the skeletal things that have gone on in Seattle.
They were starting to build out the franchise departments. The Don Anderson that you mentioned was our very first PR director, and Gary Wright, who we hope to have on the program here in the next couple of weeks, was his assistant at the time, and you were the assistant to both of them. Gary ultimately became not only the head of PR, but then a vice president, and then with the Sounders, and just has been an amazing force in Seattle sports for these 50 years that he's been here as well. So we'll talk to Gary at some point as well. But do you remember those? Of course you do. But those early days when it was a bunch of us young guys, and there was a concerted effort, right, to get us out in the community, figure out who the groups are, so that the city can meet these players.
Absolutely. Over the years, it's changed a lot more with social media. Guys are saying what they're doing. Back then, a lot of people didn't know what we were doing in the community. I remember talking to a sports writer once, and he always wanted to cover the captain's Blitz when we go to the hospitals around Christmas time, and the editor wouldn't let him do it. It was a good story, and they wanted football stories, not hospital visit stories. So you just didn't know what all the guys were doing in the community. A lot of it was done quietly, but it's continued, and
Sandy, was your job the same then as it was as you came up, except for the social media? I mean, did you have the same goals in mind, or how did you grow with the job? What really changed as you continued year after year throughout the
So when
Seahawks?
I first started, I was really PR. I would literally type the release each week. I'd have to type the roster, their height, weight, all that stuff, their birthdays on the roster, and then run it off on this machine. It was crazy. So Mike Keller was doing a lot of the community stuff. He started the Captain's Blitz and things like that. So he was really doing a lot of the community things. I can't remember exactly when I took over, but we didn't have a community department. It wasn't there. And then eventually when they did, it was part of the PR department. But it's changed a lot over the years. I think a lot of it was when we were going to move to California. And we made, we let people know what we were doing in the community then, because we needed people to vote for the stadium, for the referendum. And it was really important for people to understand, if we don't pass this, we're leaving town and we can't help these charities anymore. So then we started publicizing what we were doing a little bit more.
I remember this, and there's a lot of things, obviously, that I don't remember just because of where we are today in our lives. But I remember this specifically. We sat in an early meeting on a Wednesday morning, early in the season in 1976, and I remember Norm Evans, our offensive tackle, standing up, and he said something to the effect that, guys, when I was in Miami, and he was there for the undefeated Miami Dolphins team of 1972, still the only team undefeated, untied through an entire season, including winning the Super Bowl. And Norm is still here with us in the community. God bless him. He's just a wonderful man. But I remember him standing up in the meeting saying, "This is so-and-so." I think it was Tom Jaffa was the name that I remember, but from United Way. And he said, "We are going to be big in the United Way on this team." He said, "I was in Miami. I know the important impact that United Way has in a community. And so get ready, because this is what we're going to do." I remember that because so much of what we did in those early days, to your point, Sandy, came from sort of the bottom up. It was guys being invited to Cub Scout meetings and schools and United Way and all that, as opposed to something that came down from on high that just said, you will do this. That wasn't the case.
I totally agree with you. The guys were out in the community doing stuff all the time, but nobody knew about it, except the organizations you were helping.
Right.
But there wasn't a way for them to push it out there and tell people. Yeah.
And
they're still doing it today.
They are. They are. I remember one that did come through the office. This one just dawned on me. Don Anderson came up to me one day and he said, "Hey, Special Olympics having their big event down at Fort Lewis. They still have it. I mean, all these years later, their big spring track meets and what have you. They'd love you to come down and be a hugger and all that stuff." I had done a couple of appearances for Special Olympics. This was like 1978 or something. And so I said, great. And so went down there and was kind of standing there, and the events had just started, and there were a lot of people who looked like officials and all. So I found a guy that looked like he was the most official, and I walked up to him and I said, "Hey there." And he said, "Yes, how are you?" And I said, "Good. I'm Steve Raible. I'm here from the Seahawks, and you guys wanted to put me to work, and I'm looking forward to it." And he kind of looked on his face, and he paused, and he said, "Oh, we were hoping for Steve Largent."
Oh, no.
True story. Oh. So I ended up staying the rest of that day and came back years after that. They were a wonderful organization. But again, it was one of those, it wasn't kind of official, so you weren't really sure who was going to show up. And so you got the other Steve.
Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
But that's all right.
They were grateful, but not that grateful.
But not as grateful as they would have been.
Sandy, do you remember any unusual things that happened when that just stick in your memory of player relations with the community or certain aspects of that?
I can think of Mike Tice was doing an appearance for us, and it was, I'm going to say Federal Way, Tacoma or something, and very reliable guy. I mean, when he says he's going to do it, he's going to be there. And the next day after the event, I get a phone call, and it said that he didn't show up. And I'm like, no, I mean, that's not Mike. So I called him. He had 2 flat tires on the way to the event. This is before cell phones, so he couldn't call anybody and say, I'm not going to be there.
Right.
And so that was unusual.
Okay. Yeah, that would be unusual. You never know about those things going on.
No, and just to show you what being in this community has meant to all of us over the years, Mike Tice, who now resides outside the city but lived here in the area for so long after he came back he coached as well, coached the Minnesota Vikings as head coach, who the Seahawks play coming up. But he has continued to have an event out here, a golf tournament, for years and years to raise money. And there's a number of guys like that, because Sandy, you work on all of them just about as a volunteer yourself. But there are a lot of golf tournaments and charity events that former players still have here.
Well, Jacob Green, 37 years. 37. He lives in Texas.
Right.
This will be your 37 raising money for Fred Hutch. Mike Tice raises money for Boys and Girls Club. He's been doing it for a long time. Randall Morris lives here, but he's been doing his tournament. I think this is going to be year 18 that he's done his golf tournament. Kenny Easley has one here. Lonzo Mitz has one. David Kurtman has one over in Chelan. These guys are amazing. How they still give back to the community. Pretty special.
Yeah, and you've done a lot of things. What's amazing to me, Sandy is gone, but she's not gone.
No.
Because you're still concerned about former athletes, maybe not the athletes that are current on the team, but definitely the former athletes. Explain some of those things that you have been passionate about even after the Seahawks, after your Seahawks experience. You're still involved with the Seahawks indirectly.
So I think the one thing that I'm really proud of that I was able to get going while I was still with the Seahawks was, we're talking probably 12, 13 years ago, a former player called me and said his teammate had a health condition, and even though he had a job, he had no health insurance. And what can we do to help him? So the Seahawks helped, but I also probably wrote to you guys and said that this player needed some help with his medical bills. And we raised about $10,000 and sent the money to the player. And then about a year later, another player contacted me directly, and he said that he had been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And same thing. he had a job, but he had no health insurance. And he wasn't looking for money. We found out there was a golf tournament that was going to benefit him and help him with his medical expenses. Those two things made me realize that here's two good guys with jobs, with families, and they need a little bit of help. How many other guys are out there that also could use a little bit of help? So I knew the history of the players' fine money. When Jack Patera was with us, he'd give it back to the players at the end of the year, and you guys would have a party. And then Chuck Knox came in and said, no, you don't have a party with fine money. And he started giving it to different charities. But I didn't know what happened with the fine money now. So I found out, and it was just going to the bottom line. So I put a proposal together, and I said, why don't we take the current players' fine money and use it to help our former guys that need a little bit of help? So that's been going on. We did our first grant in 2013, and I'm still on that board here.
Okay.
And we still help the guys with that. Really important. It means so much to these guys. It's hard for them to ask for help. Everything's confidential.
Do you search those guys out, or do they actually have to initiate that first call or that first, like, how? Because I know that it's not that you sneak around, but you keep your ears open. I know that.
Yeah, I do. I used to send out newsletters to the guys, and this information would be in the newsletters, and there'd be a little form that they'd have to fill out online. We had a private website for the players, and so guys could look at that and hopefully read it and submit an application, a very simple application. We don't make them jump through hoops. But some of it's word of mouth. A guy will know about his teammate or somebody that needs help. I had one player call me last year, and he had talked to another player, and that player said, you need to call Sandy. You need to call Sandy, because he needed help with something, but it took him a whole year. He didn't want to call.
Right.
And he finally did, and we took care of it. It happened.
When you think of players today, they have foundations. They actually do volunteer a lot. Back then, the contracts were
the salaries.
The salary contracts were a lot different.
A lot.
You guys, did you both have summer jobs?
You know that.
I know that.
Did you both have?
You work part-time. I worked on the St. Michelle winery in the off-season. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I worked at Eddie Bauer for a while.
Yeah.
So we did different things. And nowadays, you don't necessarily have to. You can be interested in all kinds of stuff. But you know that those players that call you really are in need. And also, you have extended your reach towards other pro teams as well. Can you? I don't know what you can offer there, but I think that's interesting as well.
Thank you. Yes, in February of 2020, I had worked at USC. I think you guys know that before I came up here. That's where I met Don Anderson. In February of 2020, one of the players I knew from USC, Gus Williams, a Sonic player, had a severe stroke. I mean, severe stroke. And there was a GoFundMe, and so I was helping him a little bit on my own. And then a year later, Slick Watts also had a severe stroke. And it was so similar to the Seahawks. Here's two players, good players that, not only did things, brought us memories on the court, but they were out in the community doing things. And they both had GoFundMes and needed a little bit of help with their medical expenses. So I went to Todd Lewicki at the Kraken, because I had heard him talking multiple times in the media that he didn't want to get ahead of the commissioner in talking about bringing basketball back to Seattle. So I didn't want to get ahead of Todd and do anything Sonics related without his permission. So I met with him, and when I finished my little spiel, he goes, I love this. Here's what we're going to do. Very Todd, just amazing. Todd's awesome. And so there was going to be a basketball game. It was going to be the Clippers versus an Israeli team. And he said, we're going to have a reception before that game. We're going to invite the right people, and we're going to make $50,000. And I'm like, okay. And that was like not even a month away. And I still had to set up a fund, a foundation, a nonprofit. So we got it all done. It was completed the day before the event. And we raised about $90,000 at that event.
And that's really been helpful.
Yeah, and we've done for 3 years now. So, Todd's been amazing. And we've helped Gus and Slick with some of their medical expenses. They're both very limited mobility and very limited speech. And then we helped a third sonic player that also had a medical condition. He wanted to remain anonymous, but he had a medical condition and had to quit his job, and he just asked if we could cover his rent. We did it for 6 months.
Wow.
So to help get back on his feet.
First of all, it's an amazing story about what you and folks like you, but you in particular, have done over the years. And I think it's also a lesson for those who are listening that, yes, as Jim said, guys today, they make a lot of money. They have foundations and what have you. But they also have families, and they, want to help their families and all that.
Sure.
So it's not like the money is, unless you're a big, big star and you're making millions and millions and millions of dollars, which, frankly, most of the guys don't. But they all can make a pretty good living. But for folks who don't know, this is a somewhat recent occurrence. TV money has continued to drive the NFL. And so as the TV money has gotten better, player salaries have gotten better. Back in the day, it wasn't quite that way. And so when you hear a story of a player who needs help, you might think, well, wow, what did they do? Did they squander everything they had?
Yeah.
Well, no, not at all. They raised a family. They did the best that they could do, but it didn't go very far in those days. We didn't have a 401k, for instance.
Right.
We get a pension from the league, but that all started in 82 or 85 with a couple of those strikes. And while we're talking about finances, and I beg you guys, forgive me, but I have a little piece of business to do here, because this NFL season, feel every play, every hit, every moment with the Sony 1000 XM5 noise-canceling headphones. Jim is writing all this down. The official headphones of your Seattle Seahawks. With premium noise cancellation, you're in the zone. No distractions, just pure football. Whether you're in the living room or on the go, you'll never miss a beat with Sony headphones.
Raves, when I hear you do that,
do you get kind of?
I'm so excited because that just means that this program is so meaningful.
Yeah. Could you have imagined in 1977 that you and I'd be sitting here and Sandy would be sitting here and I'd be reading a Sony headphones commercial?
It didn't take me long, not that, but I have seen you in a fluffy tuxedo with a bow tie that looked like you were going somewhere.
Well, that was the style of tuxes back then.
It was,
with all
it
those,
was so fun.
With all those telethons.
But you invited me to come down at 2:00 in the morning when you were really hitting it.
When I was still playing, I was one of the hosts of the Variety Club Telethon overnight.
Right.
They couldn't get anybody else to stay up from 2 in the morning until 7 in the morning. But heck, for me, that's a chance to learn. It's like being at practice every day. You get a chance. You're in front of the camera. You don't have a script. Go.
And as a player or your teammate, I would say, what are you doing? What are you doing? It's 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
You have a tuxedo that, and then it didn't take long to know that that's where you were on your way. I mean, I could see you had a real command of what you were trying to accomplish, and you've made it into a whole different career with all kinds of accolades and earned, rightly so.
As the great sports writer in this area, Claire Farnsworth, once said, talking about all the great Seahawks, and Steve Raible, well, as a receiver, he was a better commentator. So I thought, okay, that's fair. I'll buy that. But this is not about us. This is about Sandy.
Sandy, with all the comings and goings of coaches and players, were there just some frantic gets and not gets and stuff like that for you? The successes and failures were there, or have you always got things done? Because that's the way I see you. I see her as the person that's always gotten things done. Even though maybe some guys couldn't do it, she was searching out the guy that could do it.
I think what I did is I tried to keep a list of what guys liked. I'd read newspaper articles and things. So if a guy, maybe it's a health issue. Maybe his dad had diabetes, or someone played the saxophone, or someone played like
the drums.
Exactly.
Right.
The variety shows that we used to do. But you find out what the guys like, and then you try and put them in the right position so that they're doing something that they enjoy or that touches their heart. So you try. I still have the list today of who likes to play video games and the different health issues and things like that. And so you can put the guys where they're best. Sometimes you need to send 2 guys out at one time, too. The guys aren't comfortable doing it. So they go out in pairs or something. You just have to try and make it work.
How did you get people to agree to have Rabes instead of Largent?
I know it. Yeah.
That was really...
You just say Steve, I guess.
That
was difficult.
Yeah.
Steve is coming. Great.
Yeah.
And then the huge disappointment on children's faces when they see it's not the Steve that they.
You didn't make Steve wear number 80. You didn't make Rabes wear number 80 when he showed up.
83.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Oh,
But think about how many of our guys still live here. I think it's pretty amazing when you think
That's
about
true.
how many guys stayed in the area and are still doing things in the community here. Pretty special.
And I mean, guys who came in 76 or 77 and were only here for a year or two. It's one thing if you had an entire career here, you had your playing career here, came back and had a coaching career here. I've been here ever since. And a number of us who were here for a long time, but some guys were here a year or two as players and they stayed. So I think it said something. In fact, I did a charity event just yesterday with Zoe. You mentioned him, Alonzo Mitz, former defensive tackle for the Seahawks. One of the toughest guys. The story about Zoe having his entire upper bridge just basically knocked out of his mouth during a game and continued to play is one that if you want to know toughness, that's this guy. And yet he is such a kind-hearted, good person for all he does. But you are in these situations and you suddenly say, wow, I love it up here. He's from Florida. He played a couple of seasons, maybe 3 seasons. And yet he stayed, and he has continued to contribute to the area.
When Sandy was describing having to make the roster list, and I can imagine, you think about the early days on how that roster changed, and you must have been every day putting a new list together. With that printing. It wasn't even a computer printer.
Oh, no
right?
computers. Right. No. And then we had a machine that would take the press release and it would fold it and stuff it in the envelope for you. And, I mean, we mailed all that stuff out.
Right.
It was crazy.
Yeah. Just lost my train of thought.
I wanted to say, explain the relationship you had with Gary because it was really, I mean, you were focused on the players trying to, I'm sure Gary relied on you. How did you work with Gary Wright? Because did he take over for Don Anderson?
He did.
Okay.
So when I was at USC, I was there for 5 seasons, and then this new league started, the World Football League. And Don Anderson took a job with the league office and asked me to go with him, and that's when he hired Gary. So Gary joined us with the World Football League. Well, then a year and a half later, the World Football League folded. But the NFL was expanding. 2 new teams, Tampa Bay and Seattle. And Don had a really good feel about, he interviewed with both, but he had a really good feel about the Seattle team because I guess he met with the Nordstrom family and just, and we thought he'd go to Tampa Bay because John McKay was a head coach at USC who ended up being the coach down at Tampa Bay. So the 3 of us were with the World Football League, and then the Seahawks job opened and he invited Gary and I to come with him. And so that's when all 3 of us came up here to Seattle. So Don, there was a coaching change, and
that was in '82.
And Don was kind of let go. And he started his own PR firm.
And then Gary.
Stepped up, and so Gary is, he's amazing. Absolutely amazing. The Pro Football Hall of Fame honored him a couple of years ago with this new Awards of Excellence that they're doing.
Sure.
Pretty special.
So Sandy, describe, because her talent, as we know, kind of runs a long line. And the other area of your expertise was Super Bowls.
Oh, yes,
right?
Yes.
And you and Gary, you were hired to actually take charge of, and I don't exactly know what it is, but I'd like you to explain to our massive audience what you had to do, or how did that begin, and what you and Gary did during Super Bowl weeks.
Well, I was fortunate enough to work 26 Super Bowls. One when I was still at USC because there was a game, I think it was Super Bowl 7. Yikes.
When you say
at the
work
Memorial
at Super
Coliseum.
Bowls, explain that too.
Do what?
Explain, you said you got to work
it. Okay, so at
Super
the
Bowls.
time
What does that
when I
mean?
was at SC, I had a second job helping with the scoreboard at the Coliseum.
Oh,
Yeah. And so that was what I did. I was working the scoreboard during the Super Bowl game. But then 1988 was the next time. The Super Bowl was in San Diego, and Gary was heading up the media center, which is unbelievable. I mean, there's people from all over the world that come in, media from everywhere. And so basically you have an area that's set up where you're putting out press releases daily. They're getting quotes from the players and all that. And you have tables set up with all these press releases available. There's interviews going on. You're just taking care of the media in any way you can. So my job was pretty much setting up the office, I guess, office manager, making sure that we'd get there early and we'd have desks for the people that needed desks. We'd have the staplers, the Scotch tape, set up mailboxes and all that so that we could communicate. So it's just making sure everything was running as well as could be. And we ended up putting a manual together of the different jobs and things like that and what each job entailed.
so that was 1988, and
That
it
was
had nothing to do with
1988.
it didn't have anything to do with the Seahawks.
Had nothing
it was
to
the
do
league.
with the Seahawks.
Okay.
It was working with the league office.
Did that continue then after that?
Yeah. So and then the next year was in Miami. So those 2 years I paid my own way, and after that the NFL started hiring, and they paid for me to come, which was really nice. And so you got the airfare and the hotel and everything. And I mean, you're seeing these amazing cities, and you're going out to dinner every night. And I think the best part of it is you're meeting people from other teams that you can now call on when you need something. A guy from, I don't know if you guys are going to remember this, but a couple of years ago, the Amtrak train that was just starting out and was going to Portland, and it flipped.
Right down by DuPont.
Yes.
On 25.
There was one of the kids that was on that train. He was paralyzed, and he was at Children's Hospital. And I got a couple players, and I went with them. It was KJ, and I can't remember who all was with us, Mike Morgan, Lofa. And we went to visit him, and everything in his room was Jaguars, Jacksonville Jaguars. He was a huge Jaguars fan. So I got a hold of the guy down there, and he sent an autographed helmet of, is it Leonard Fournette?
Yeah,
Is
the
he down?
back,
Okay.
running back, yeah.
So, yeah, and he sent an autographed real helmet of Leonard Fournette to the kid. So it just having someone with other teams that can help you, it really, it was.
Yeah, do you think that's what the Super Bowls did for you? Was it connected you with all the other teams in the NFL?
Yeah, because they've stopped now having guys advance games anymore. The guys used to come in here a week ahead of time and do things. All of that's changed,
Because of technology.
because
more
of
than anything.
technology, absolutely. And even when we first started, we'd have there'd be PR meetings. I think the first PR meetings I went to were in Dallas, and we got to go to South Fork and all these cool things. But you got to meet the other guys in community. The first time I went to these meetings, they let us have breakout sessions. The community people, we didn't get to, we had a few little breakout sessions, but you got to meet the people and share ideas. And the lady in charge then at the NFL, Beth Colleton, she used to say, if somebody's doing something good in their community, steal it. I mean, take it and work it. I mean, there's share ideas and do it. So that's what we all did. It was pretty cool.
A reminder that broadcasting from the Seahawks podcast studio presented by Sony, an official partner of the Seattle Seahawks. One point I need to make right away. When you mentioned that you and Don, at first, when you left USC, went to the World Football League. And I think it was Portland, was it not?
No, it was
Southern
the league.
California Sun.
It was the league office
right?
to begin with. We were in Newport
right.
Beach. And then the next year they moved to New York, and we were the Southern California Sun.
But I think,
magenta and orange.
Wasn't there a Portland team at that time?
There was.
That year?
Yes.
And the reason why I remember this, my first pair of shoulder pads with the Seahawks were from the Portland team.
my
They were a pair
gosh.
of used shoulder pads.
Oh my gosh.
Went in
Nothing
to get
was
fitted,
too-
and they were these kind of big, boxy-looking shoulder pads, and I was this, wide
Nothing was
receiver.
too good for you.
No, here you
Portland
go.
Storm.
Somebody else sweated
Yeah.
in these for an entire season. Go for it,
the
young
best.
man.
I love
We provided the
Nothing
best
but the
equipment.
best. There
it.
you
was
go.
the Portland Storm.
Yes.
Yes,
Portland
the
Storm.
Portland Storm.
Unbelievable.
God,
Sandy, what was it like then? You had all these, since 1988, really, you were going to Super Bowl after Super Bowl. And then all of a sudden we get to go, when I was a coach here with Mike Holmgren, 2006. What was that like as you had all that experience? because I remember you telling us what to do and how to do it and all that kind of stuff and what the options were.
Well, I think the whole message then was take the pressure off the players. There's going to be everybody's going to reach out to them, and they're going to want tickets. They're going to want something, and take that pressure off of them. And work with the wives. Let them handle a lot of that. So we would meet with the wives and tell them the same thing. Let them play the game. It's really important. This is an opportunity of a lifetime. And so we did everything we could so that the players could just do what they needed to do and make it as normal as we could for them.
But you didn't go along with us. You had to go before.
Correct.
And was it a huge setup?
Yeah, we did. We set up. We put gifts in everybody's rooms and things like that. You don't remember that, or we did. I can't remember what it was, but we had gifts in all the rooms, and we had all the meeting rooms. We made sure everything was set up when the players came. That was actually it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
yeah.
The first time like that is pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
We were outside of Detroit, as I remember, Pontiac or someplace. And Dearborn, somewhere outside.
It was in Dearborn.
Yeah,
yeah.
And but a perfectly fine facility, had lots of meeting room and all that stuff.
And it was cold.
And it was cold and got colder as it went on. But happily, the game was inside.
Yeah.
Unhappily, the way it ended, but still.
And all those terrible towels.
Yeah, boy, it was
everywhere.
Like a Pittsburgh. Like
everywhere.
We learned from that one.
Did you feel like you prepared? Like we were prepared? Because I don't think we were prepared for the towel. That was the first. I mean, that was. Well, I walked in there
like
as a coach. Yeah, and I was thinking, wait a minute.
But think about it, how close Pittsburgh is to Detroit, and because there's usually when you get a hotel room, it's for 4. You have to get 4 nights, and so our fans, I think they just they sold their tickets and made the money, and because I know our section was a lot of Pittsburgh people in it.
Yeah. Well, congratulations for all that whole your career. The body of your career has just been amazing.
Well, think about Japan. We went to Japan.
Yeah.
I went twice because I went with the cheerleaders, which was kind of cool. They went over kind of a promotional thing and then went with the team. And I've been really fortunate.
You also have been the keeper of the goods, the keeper of the boxes and boxes, the treasure trove of the Seattle Seahawks. And all of us who are former players have stuff kind of
What does she have of yours?
Away.
What does she have of yours, Steve?
Not much, because most of what I had, I kept, and I've got it, including my original T-shirt and athletic supporter, I think, in a mesh bag.
Good.
But that's probably more than you want to know. And trust me, I've stopped using them last year. But it's all the other stuff that starts in 76 that says Seahawks, something that's a logoed item or something that just says, here's how the Seahawks have grown. You've had access to this, plus you've saved so much stuff. Yeah. And we could fill a section of the Louvre with what you have, and I think what a lot of us could add to that, right?
Yeah. I told you I worked the 26 Super Bowls. You get a lot of stuff from those. I mean, a lot. Not just the programs, but there's, T-shirts and wine glasses and
tennis shoes. I have Super Bowl tennis shoes.
So much stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
So I took the stuff that wasn't Seahawks and I shipped it to the Pro Football Hall of Fame because I feel it's going to live on, and I thought that was a pretty cool thing. Even when I worked at USC and did that Super Bowl 7, what they did is they gave us our lunch in a little suitcase. It was a tiny little red and black suitcase. It zipped up, and I'm like, what am I ever going to do with this? So I sent it to the Hall of Fame. I kind of like the idea that it's going to be there.
Where do you are there things today that create some memories and fans in our community would like to see some of the history of the Seahawks? I mean, do you have some really? I know what you have. You have one pair of, and these are broom ball shoes. They're tennis shoes that have sponge and holes in them. They're white top canvas shoes with an orange sponge sort of bottom on them.
For what?
And they were supposed to be used when the field was frozen. And I remember when we went to Minnesota, the game, our entry, when Pete Gross was,
76.
in 76 against Minnesota,
right.
The ground, when you came out of the dugout, the ground, it was grass. It was pure grass. The sun was out. I thought, oh, this is awesome. you walk out there and it was painted dirt.
Yes, and it was
Number
frozen.
one, and it was frozen solid.
Yeah.
So I tried those
Yes.
shoes on, and they were the worst. You know,
Yes.
but I kept them and I gave them to
You did.
Sandy, and just those shoes
Yes.
alone were worth really looking at, going, "There's no way you
And
would
you still
never."
have. You
Well,
would
what
have
I
those
did is
somewhere
I
in a-
think I wrote that story down because
Yeah.
it's so unique, like what these are and where they came from. But this is all what's in the Seahawks storage unit in Kent. So there's a whole, there's a Kent warehouse, and it's for the pro shop. So it's where they keep a lot of their goods. But they gave us a little corner of it that's fenced off. And in there is shelves with, I can't even tell you how much stuff is in there. I saved, when they changed the carpet in this VMAC, I saved some of the squares of the carpeting. I mean, you never know.
Yeah.
So there's just all kinds of stuff in there. But a lot of stuff, I started a bin with Mike Holmgren has a bin. I think there's a Chuck Knox bin. I did Ring of Honor bins. So
Okay.
there's a Jim
Yeah.
Zorn bin, Kenny Easley bin, then Steve Largent bin. Yeah, there's all kinds. All the team photos on wood,
Mhm.
they're all back there. There's so much
I have a
stuff.
chunk of the Kingdome.
Yes, yes.
You
Yeah,
know,
I have,
it's got blue
I have
paint on
some
it. and
Pieces.
I
Don't know
do
what it's
too.
from, but
in
I got
bag
a chunk.
somewhere.
I have
Yeah.
that at home. That they gave that to me at home. But
You didn't
yeah,
get you can get a seat. They didn't save a seat out of the Kingdom.
I
They
don't
they
think
sold
they.
a lot of those
I
things.
know, but I found someone that bought them,
Uh huh.
and I had contacted him, and then I don't think they're gone.
I mean,
Did you and Gary make up some of the awards that were given, the special recognitions that either for coaches, for players, or honoring people who volunteer? Did you and Gary make some of those up?
I don't know because I know like there's a Seahawker of the Year and things like that. The NFL has a lot of those awards. The one thing I did mention to Mario after I was retired, but I told him there was something I wanted to do that I wasn't able to get done before I retired, and that was have a Legend of the Year. And I mentioned to him at a game, and then on Monday morning he emailed me saying, "Can you give me more information on what you're talking about?" So I sent him an email with what I was thinking and how we should recognize a legend that was still doing great things in the community. And I also put in there that I suggested Jacob Green should get the first one with all he had done with Fred Hutch. And so they're still continuing that. I know Jermaine Kearse won it this past year, and Randall got it last year. And yeah,
Good.
so I'm really happy about that one because I think that's pretty cool to recognize the players that are doing things.
Yeah.
after all your years of being a part of the Seahawks, is there one thing that you look back and say, this might be the best thing I ever did in my career, and it may have nothing to do with football,
Oh,
but this was I'm really proud of this moment, or I'm proud of the people that I was associated with in doing this.
boy, oh boy. I know that there's a couple things that I really like that I did here, and one is the wall downstairs with the plaques
signature
of the
wall?
players. Yeah. I remember when we unveiled that, it was Legends Weekend, and everybody was in the IPF. And then after practice, we took everybody out into the hallway and kind of unveiled it and let the guys see it and all the selfies and things that were going on. But I'll never forget Nesby Glasgow. He was wiping away tears. And I thought, oh my gosh.
Just because he could see his
yeah,
name
he saw
on
his
the wall.
name.
Yeah.
And I've actually, I took a picture of it. I've helped them update it a couple times. And I've taken pictures of the sections, and I've sent it to a couple guys that haven't ever seen it because they don't live here. I've sent them their name. Yeah, Edwin had me send him his.
Yeah.
So
I think that's really cool.
There
yes,
is-
I like that one.
This wall is, for those of you, the IPF indoor practice facility here at the Virginia Mason Athletic Facility. But there's a wall, and of course, it's expanding down the length of the facility because we keep adding players. But if you played for a year, if you played
If you
for a
were
season,
on the active
on the
roster.
active roster, there you go. Then you had a plaque. I don't know what, 3 inches.
It was like a
by
brick, a
5
little-
inches. Yeah,
like
about
a
the size
brick.
of a brick
Yeah.
with your signature on it. And Sandy, of course, had to learn how to expropriate everybody's signature, to forge all those signatures on pictures for everybody that wanted them of Z-Man. And but it is so cool
Yeah.
to walk up there and to know that So from that date, 76 through, for me, 81, that your name isn't up every time, but it's that first year.
The first year.
And so, and it keeps growing, and the new kids who are here that come back after their first season look up and see their name on there.
Yeah,
and that's really, regardless of everything else that football is today,
right.
those kinds of things really mean
not
something.
forgotten.
Not at all.
You were part of this.
You're part of this organization, and it says so on the wall, and that's what's really cool.
I think that's pretty cool, and I also think for Sandy, her passion is getting this a museum going so that people can come and see it, and that may be in the future for her. So I think she's going to have, if we had her on again and that happened, she might say that is one of the accomplishments. And then I would say, and I'm going to put this out to you because I know that we all appreciate, is the care that you take for other players, for past players and even players that have been involved in Northwest sports, pro sports. You do a great job of continuing to care for that. And I can sense your passion for that, for those causes.
Yeah.
so
These guys
many
do
players.
so much in the community. Look at what you guys do alone. I mean, my goodness. Pebble Beach, with the Navy SEAL. I mean, and you're at every event emceeing it, and you even, like, last minute helped me out with my Sonics Legends Fund the day before I
would not
called
have
you.
because you get to see, and there are so many other great people who came to that. Nate McMillan came.
Yes.
And
Lenny
Dale
Wilkins. And
Lenny,
I know,
everybody.
I know.
They're getting a little tired of him wanting like blue and green M&Ms and stuff like that in his green room and things of that nature. But, right now he's...
Short of that.
But what you guys do in the community, that's what is all, it's kind of a little payback in a way, because you guys are out there at every school function, at hospitals visiting kids, you're at military bases, senior citizen centers. I mean, you're, all these golf tournaments and these charity events.
Well, we've learned from the best on how to say yes to those kinds of things.
And quite frankly, it comes down to your leadership, Gary, Don, going all the way back, and through all of those who are in positions today. But it also is that logo that's in the wall, on the wall right here in our studio. It's that Seahawk logo, because we've all been a part of this, the three of us now, almost 50 years.
Yeah.
So that's the reason we're all here. That's the reason that Sandy Gregory had to be a part of this podcast. Sandy, we appreciate it, as always. I know you were a little nervous when you sat down, and you look like a pro.
Out of my comfort zone, but
Jim,
thank
maybe
you.
not so much, but you, the pro, as always.
We just hope it wasn't underwhelming
for you. That's
for
right.
your experience.
That's right. That's right. And by the way, broadcasting from the Seahawks podcast studio, presented by Sony, an official partner of the Seattle Seahawks. This has been Seahawks Stories with yours truly and Jim Zorn and today's guest, Sandy Gregory. We will see you next time.
Thanks, Sandy.